December 11, 1941. Adolf Hitler stands before the German Reichstag, about to make a decision that will doom 80 million people. In just moments, he'll declare war on the most powerful industrial nation on Earth. His generals haven't been consulted. There's been no strategic debate, no careful weighing of Germany's capabilities against American industrial might. And here's the thing. Germany is already fighting the largest land war in human history against the Soviet Union. Their troops are freezing to death outside Moscow. Supply lines are stretched to breaking point. But Hitler doesn't care about any of that. Because the man the German people believe is a military genius is actually making the biggest strategic blunder in military history. But you wouldn't know it from looking at the crowds. They're cheering. The propaganda machine has done its job perfectly. To them, Hitler is invincible. A strategic mastermind who's delivered victory after victory without the mass suffering their parents endured in the First World War. What they don't know, what they can't know, is that behind the propaganda, something is rotting at the core of Nazi Germany. The leadership they think is united is actually tearing itself apart with rivalry and backstabbing. The quick war they've been promised is turning into a nightmare. And the man they've placed all their faith in? He's slowly falling apart, physically and mentally, hidden away in bunkers while his personal doctor pumps him full of barbiturates, sedatives, and opioids. This is the story of how reality started breaking through the Nazi propaganda machine. How Hitler's declaration of war on America stretched Germany beyond any hope of recovery. And how the gap between what Germans were told and what was actually happening became impossible to hide. Hitler's biggest mistake. Let's rewind 18 months. It's June 40, and for most Germans, things have never looked better. France has fallen in just 6 weeks. The same France that held out for 4 bloody years in World War I. The same France that left an entire generation of German fathers dead or maimed in trenches. Hitler has avenged that humiliation in 42 days. Poland? Conquered in a month. Denmark and Norway? Taken in weeks. The Netherlands, Belgium, Luxembourg, all swept aside like dominoes. You have to understand what this looked like to ordinary Germans. They'd lived through the trauma of the First World War. They'd watched their country collapse into hyperinflation, political chaos, and national humiliation. They'd been told at Versailles that they were solely responsible for all the death and destruction. And now they're winning. Their cities aren't being bombed. Their men aren't dying by the hundreds of thousands in frozen trenches. Life actually seems to be getting better. From the outside, Nazi Germany in 1940 looks unstoppable. Hitler has restored German pride. He's created millions of jobs. He's reclaimed lost territories, and he's done it all without the mass casualties that made World War I so traumatic. Behind this success story stands the man himself, Adolf Hitler. To his people, he's transformed from a fringe political agitator into the greatest military strategist of the age. Newspapers compare him to Napoleon, to Frederick the Great, to Caesar himself. His speeches draw massive crowds. His image is everywhere, on posters, in newsreels, in photographs carefully staged to show him as a decisive, powerful leader. And crucially, behind Hitler stands what appears to be a brilliant, united Nazi leadership. Rudolf Hess, his deputy and oldest comrade. Hermann Göring, the decorated war hero who commands the Luftwaffe. Joseph Goebbels, the propaganda genius who controls every newspaper, every radio broadcast, every piece of information that reaches German ears. Heinrich Himmler, the SS chief who keeps order with ruthless efficiency. To the German public, these men are a team, a well-oiled machine working in perfect harmony toward Germany's greatness. But here's what you need to understand about totalitarian regimes. They survive by controlling reality itself. Not just what people do, but what people think, what they believe, what they know. And the man in charge of controlling that reality is Joseph Goebbels. Goebbels operates from his propaganda ministry in the heart of Berlin. From here, he exercises complete control over German media. Every newspaper editor takes their orders from him. Every radio broadcast is approved by his office. Every film, every newsreel, every public speech, all of it filtered through Goebbels' propaganda machine. And Goebbels is good at his job, frighteningly good. He understands something fundamental about propaganda. People want to believe good news. They want to think their leader is brilliant. They want to believe victory is just around the corner. So, give them that reality, and they'll embrace it. His newsreels are masterpieces of manipulation. They show German troops marching triumphantly through conquered cities. They show French prisoners shuffling dejectedly into captivity. They show Hitler receiving flowers from grateful crowds. The message is clear. Germany's winning, Hitler is a genius, and the war will be over. Germans pack into cinemas across the country to watch these newsreels. The internal intelligence reports that Goebbels receives, gathered by spies eavesdropping in bars and restaurants, confirm that people are eating it up. They're thrilled, they're proud, they believe every word. But then, in the early summer of 1941, something happens that even Goebbels' propaganda machine struggles to spin. May 10, 1941. A British Home Guard unit in southern Scotland receives a call about a plane crash. When they reach the site, they find something bizarre. A German officer has parachuted into a field and is asking to see the Duke of Hamilton. The officer is taken into custody and transported to London for interrogation. At first, nobody believes his story. It's too crazy, too unlikely. But then the truth emerges. The lone parachutist is Rudolf Hess, Hitler's deputy Führer, one of the most powerful men in Nazi Germany. Let me tell you about Rudolf Hess because you need to understand how shocking this is. Hess isn't some minor official. He's been with Hitler since the beginning, since the 1920s, when the Nazi Party was just a gang of beer hall agitators in Munich. He was there during the beer hall putsch in 1923. He served time with Hitler, acting as his secretary while he dictated Mein Kampf. Hess is Hitler's oldest comrade, his most loyal follower, the man who would stand on stage and introduce Hitler at rallies with quasi-religious reverence. To the German public, he's a symbol of everything the Nazi Party represents: loyalty, dedication, unity. And now, he's sitting in the Tower of London. The British are completely baffled. What is the deputy Führer of Nazi Germany alone in Scotland? As the interrogation continues, Hess spins a story about coming to negotiate peace with Britain. He claims he's on a secret diplomatic mission authorized by Hitler. But that's not what's really going on. The truth that emerges is far more revealing about what's actually happening inside Nazi Germany. Hess isn't on a peace mission at all. He's trying to save his own position in the Nazi hierarchy. Because here's what the German people don't know. The Nazi leadership isn't a unified team. It's a shark tank. Behind the carefully managed public image, Hitler's top officials are constantly jockeying for position, trying to gain favor with the Führer, sabotaging each other's initiatives, and fighting over scraps of power and influence. Hess has been losing that fight. Goering is ascendant. Himmler is gaining power. Martin Bormann, Hitler's personal secretary, has been systematically cutting Hess out of important decisions. Hess is becoming irrelevant, and he knows it. So he concocts this insane plan: fly to Britain, negotiate peace, return home as a hero, restore his position as Hitler's right-hand man. It's desperate. It's delusional. It's the act of a man who knows he's losing his grip on power. And critically, it's the first public sign that something is very wrong at the top of the Nazi Party. Back in Germany, Hitler receives the news in a letter Hess left behind. His reaction is volcanic. He summons his aides and screams at them for hours. Hess has embarrassed him, embarrassed the party, embarrassed Germany on the world stage. But Hitler's fury isn't just about the embarrassment. It's about what Hess's defection reveals, that the carefully constructed image of Nazi unity is a lie. The problem lands on Goebbels' desk. How do you spin this? How do you explain why the deputy Führer, the second most powerful man in Germany, just fled to enemy territory? Goebbels' solution is simple. Declare that Hess has gone insane. He suffered a mental breakdown. He's lost his reason under the pressure of his duties. It's not about political infighting or cracks in the leadership. It's just one man who couldn't handle the stress. But this explanation creates its own problem. If the deputy Führer is insane, why was he still in his post? Why didn't anyone notice? And what does it say about Hitler's judgment that he kept a madman as his second-in-command for nearly 2 decades? Germans aren't stupid. They whisper these questions to each other in private. For the first time, doubts begin to creep in. Not big doubts, not yet, but doubts nonetheless. The Hess affair passes, but it's left a mark. The image of perfect Nazi unity has been damaged, and it's about to get much, much worse. June 22, 1941. Just 6 weeks after Hess parachutes into Scotland, Hitler launches the largest military operation in human history. Operation Barbarossa, the invasion of the Soviet Union. 3 million German soldiers, 3,000 tanks, and 2,000 aircraft smash across the Soviet border on a front stretching from the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea. It's an invasion force so massive it dwarfs anything previously seen in warfare. For Hitler, this is the war he's always wanted, the war he wrote about in Mein Kampf 16 years earlier. This is the final showdown with communism, what Hitler sees as a Jewish Bolshevik conspiracy threatening to destroy Germany. But it's more than ideology. This is about Lebensraum, living space. Hitler believes the German people need room to expand, and that space must come from the East, from lands occupied by what the Nazis consider inferior Slavic peoples who don't deserve to keep their territory. In Germany, there's anxiety. War with the Soviet Union means war on a massive scale. The Soviet Union is enormous. It covers 1/6 of the world's land surface. It has a population of 190 million people. Even with all of Germany's victories, this is a whole different level. But then the news starts coming in, and suddenly Germans are celebrating again. The Wehrmacht is advancing faster than anyone thought possible. In the first week alone, German forces penetrate 300 miles into Soviet territory. Soviet defensive lines crumble. Entire Soviet armies are surrounded and destroyed. Within a month, German forces have taken over 1.5 million Soviet prisoners. The newsreels Goebbels sends to cinemas across Germany show an uninterrupted stream of victories. German tanks rolling across endless steppes, columns of Soviet prisoners stretching to the horizon, Soviet equipment lying abandoned on roadsides. To Germans watching in darkened theaters, it looks like Hitler has pulled off another miracle. The Soviet Union, this massive, threatening colossus, is being defeated just as quickly as France was. In October 1941, Hitler gives a speech where he declares that the Soviet Union is broken and will never rise again. He genuinely believes the war is won. He's already planning how to exploit Soviet resources and resettle the conquered territories with German colonists. But then progress begins to slow. Here's what Hitler and his generals didn't fully appreciate. The Soviet Union is vast in a way that's hard to comprehend. Germany is about 350,000 square kilometers. The Soviet Union is 22 million square kilometers.
It's not just bigger, it's a completely different scale of warfare. German supply lines are stretching further and further. Trucks and tanks are breaking down. Fuel supplies are running low. And the Red Army, despite horrific losses, keeps fighting. Stalin can draw on seemingly endless reserves of men and material. At German high command, generals are starting to worry. Some privately admit they underestimated the scale of the task. There are stories of officers saying, "Christ, isn't this country big?" But Hitler won't listen to their concerns. From his headquarters in East Prussia, he calls his generals daily, demanding they push forward faster. When they try to explain the logistical problems, he dismisses their objections. He calls them cowards and pessimists. And then nature intervenes. In November, the first snow falls. By December, temperatures outside Moscow have dropped to -30 degrees Fahrenheit. The ground freezes solid to a depth of 5 feet. German soldiers, equipped for a quick summer campaign, find themselves fighting in the worst winter in decades. The cold is beyond anything most of them have experienced. Weapons freeze and jam. Vehicle engines seize up. Fuel turns to sludge. Men literally cannot urinate in the open air without risking frostbite. The best food you can hope for is raw horseflesh, and you can't cook it because the smoke from a fire would give away your position to Soviet troops. Men huddle in dugouts, slowly freezing, watching their comrades die from cold and hunger. The German advance grinds to a halt. For the first time in the war, the Wehrmacht is forced into a tactical retreat. For Hitler, this is a disaster. He's promised the German people that the Soviet Union would be conquered in 6 weeks. It's now been 5 months, and German forces are pulling back from Moscow. So how does Goebbels handle this? How do you spin a retreat as a victory? Simple. You lie. Goebbels' propaganda machine goes into overdrive. Newsreels show German soldiers enjoying the snow, building snowmen, engaged in cheerful snowball fights. The retreat is reframed as a strategic repositioning. Soviet resistance is portrayed as the last desperate gasps of a dying regime. And most importantly, Hitler is presented not as a leader who miscalculated, but as a strategic genius playing a long game that lesser minds can't understand.
The propaganda works. Those intelligence reports from Goebbels' spies show that most Germans still believe Hitler knows what he's doing. They trust him. They believe in him. But then something happens that will change everything. An event halfway around the world that will seal Germany's fate. December 7th, 1941. Japanese aircraft bombed the American Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. In a few hours, they sink or damage 18 ships and kill over 2,400 Americans. The next day, the United States declares war on Japan. For Adolf Hitler, sitting in his headquarters in East Prussia, this creates a dilemma. Germany and Japan have signed the Tripartite Pact, a mutual defense agreement. But that pact specifically applies when one party is attacked, not when they're the aggressor. Hitler has no obligation to join Japan's war with America. So what does Hitler do? This is one of the most crucial decisions of the entire war. Let's walk through this, because you need to understand just how catastrophic this moment is. The case against declaring war on America is overwhelming. America is an economic superpower. Its industrial capacity dwarfs Germany's. In 1941, the United States produces more steel than Germany, Japan, and Italy combined. Its factories can be converted to military production on a scale Germany can't match. American population, 132 million. German population, 80 million. American GDP, $1.2 trillion. German GDP, $400 billion.
These aren't small differences. They're fundamental disparities in national power. Germany is already fighting the Soviet Union, a war that's proving far more difficult than Hitler anticipated. German forces are stretched across thousands of miles of front line. They're losing thousands of men every week. Supply lines are strained to breaking point. Adding America to the list of enemies would be strategic insanity. And yet, Hitler, essentially alone, decides Germany will declare war on America. He consults briefly with his foreign minister, Joachim Ribbentrop. He talks to a few close advisors, but there's no serious strategic debate, no careful analysis of German capabilities versus American industrial might, no consideration of what happens if the war drags on for years. Hitler makes his decision based on a fundamental miscalculation about America itself. In Hitler's worldview, America is weak. It's a mongrel nation, a racial melting pot of different ethnic groups that lack the unity and strength of purpose that supposedly characterizes Germanic peoples. He thinks Americans are soft, decadent, unwilling to fight a serious war. He believes America will accept a negotiated peace that leaves Germany in control of Europe and Japan in control of the Pacific. Why would Americans die fighting for Britain or France? What's Europe to them? This isn't just Hitler's opinion. It's shared by many in the Nazi leadership. They look at American culture, Hollywood movies, jazz music, consumer goods, and they see weakness, not strength. They don't understand that economic prosperity can be converted into military power. There's also a tactical consideration. If Germany doesn't support Japan now, the Tripartite Pact becomes meaningless. And there's a chance, a good chance, Hitler thinks, that Japanese forces will tie down American military power in the Pacific, preventing the United States from seriously threatening Germany in Europe. On December 11, 1941, 4 days after Pearl Harbor, Hitler addresses the Reichstag. He recounts a litany of grievances against America, President Roosevelt's support for Britain, American shipments of military equipment to Germany's enemies, American naval patrols in the Atlantic. And then he declares war. There's a gasp from the assembled delegates, but they're all Nazis, all loyal to Hitler, and they quickly break into applause. Hitler explains that Germany couldn't wait for developments to overtake them. They had to take the initiative. To most Germans, America seems very far away. It's across an ocean. How much could it really hurt Germany? They're about to find out. What's remarkable about this decision isn't just that it's wrong, it's how wrong it is. This isn't a close call that could have gone either way. This is a catastrophic strategic blunder, made quickly with minimal consultation, based on racial ideology and wishful thinking rather than realistic assessment of American capabilities. And here's the thing that makes it even worse. Germany gains essentially nothing from this decision. Even if the war with America had somehow gone well, the best-case scenario would be Germany continuing to fight the Soviet Union while America ties down Japan in the Pacific. That's not a German victory, that's just the status quo. But the downside? The downside is that Germany now faces the combined industrial might of America, Britain, and the Soviet Union. 3 of the most powerful nations on Earth, all dedicated to Germany's destruction. Hitler has just turned a difficult war into an unwinnable one. In the months following the declaration of war, most Germans don't yet understand what this means. America is still mobilizing. Its forces are still mostly in North America or heading to the Pacific. The immediate impact on Germany seems minimal, but the declaration of war has started a clock ticking. American factories are retooling. American men are being drafted and trained. American weapons are being produced in quantities that will soon dwarf Germany's output. In 1942, American factories will produce 47,000 aircraft. Germany will produce 15,000. In 1943, America will produce 86,000 aircraft. Germany will produce 25,000. These numbers tell a story of inevitability. Germany cannot win an industrial war against America. It's mathematically impossible. But Hitler and most Germans don't see this yet. They still believe the war will be over soon. They still trust Hitler's strategic genius. That trust is about to be shattered at a city on the Volga River whose name will become synonymous with military catastrophe. Spring 1942. The snow melts on the Eastern Front, and Hitler orders a new offensive. This time, the target is the southern Soviet Union, the Caucasus region with its vital oil fields, and a major industrial city on the Volga River called Stalingrad. Initially, the offensive goes well. German forces push deep into Soviet territory. By September, the German Sixth Army, under General Paulus, reaches Stalingrad. The battle that follows is unlike anything in military history. It's not warfare as German soldiers have known it. This is urban combat at its most brutal and savage.
Stalingrad is a sprawling industrial city of 400,000 people. It stretches along the western bank of the Volga River for over 30 miles. The Soviets have decided to defend every street, every building, every room. German soldiers find themselves fighting for control of individual apartment buildings. Combat happens room by room, floor by floor. Snipers pick off soldiers from rubble. Soldiers throw grenades into basements. Life expectancy for a newly arrived Soviet soldier is less than 24 hours. One German soldier writes home describing conditions. You're surrounded by corpses, by lice, by the constant smell of death. You eat next to comrades who are defecating, because leaving covered to find a latrine means a Russian sniper will put a bullet in your head. But despite the horrific casualties on both sides, German forces are winning. By November, they've captured most of the city. Soviet defenders are squeezed into a tiny strip of land along the riverbank. Victory seems just days away. Then the situation changes with shocking speed. November 19th, 1942. Soviet forces launch a massive counteroffensive. In a brilliantly planned operation, Russian troops smash through German lines north and south of Stalingrad. 4 days later, the two pincers meet west of the city. 250,000 German soldiers are now surrounded, cut off from supplies, cut off from reinforcements, trapped. At German high command, there's panic. This is a disaster of the first order. An entire army is about to be destroyed unless they're either relieved or allowed to break out. Most of Hitler's generals advocate for an immediate breakout. The Sixth Army should fight its way west, link up with German forces, and retreat to defensible positions. Yes, they'll lose equipment. Yes, there will be casualties. But the alternative is losing the entire army. But Hitler, now operating from his headquarters at the Wolf's Lair in Poland, a massive complex of bunkers deep in the forest, refuses to authorize a retreat. You need to understand something about Hitler's mentality by this point in the war. He's developed an almost mystical belief in the power of will. He thinks that German soldiers, if ordered to stand firm, can hold any position through sheer determination. Retreat, in his mind, is defeatism. It's the first step toward defeat. He's also convinced that past German retreats, including the withdrawal from Moscow the winter before, happened because his generals lacked the will to fight. If they just pushed forward, victory would be theirs. So when his generals tell him the Sixth Army must retreat from Stalingrad, Hitler refuses. The army will stand and fight. They will hold their ground until relieved. But there's a problem. How do you supply 250,000 men who are surrounded by enemy forces? That's when Hermann Göring steps forward. Göring is one of Hitler's oldest comrades. He's been with the Nazi Party since 1922. He commanded air forces in World War I, earning medals for bravery. He was wounded during Hitler's beer hall putsch in 1923. He's built the Luftwaffe into what was, at the start of the war, the most powerful air force in the world. He's also Hitler's designated successor.
If anything happens to Hitler, Göring becomes Führer. To Hitler and to the German public, Göring is a war hero and a capable leader. His offices in Berlin are grand and imposing, befitting his status as the second most powerful man in Germany. But here's what most people don't know. By 1942, Hermann Göring is not the man he once was. In the 1920s, Göring was wounded in the groin during the beer hall putsch. Doctors prescribed morphine for the pain. Göring became addicted. By the 1940s, he's dependent on morphine and other drugs. It's changed his personality and clouded his judgment. He's also developed an all-consuming obsession with stolen art. As the Nazis conquered Europe, teams of specialists followed the armies, looting artwork from museums, private collections, and Jewish homes. These stolen treasures flow back to Germany, and Göring has made himself the chief beneficiary. By 1942, Göring has amassed a personal collection of over 1,200 paintings and sculptures. He spends his time acquiring more art, showing off his collection, and hosting lavish parties at his country estate. Meanwhile, the Air Force he supposedly commands is struggling with equipment shortages and deteriorating performance. This is the man who tells Hitler he can save the Sixth Army at Stalingrad. Göring's solution? Airlift supplies to the encircled troops. The Luftwaffe will fly in food, ammunition, and fuel. The army can hold out until German forces break through the encirclement. Hitler enthusiastically embraces the plan. It means he doesn't have to authorize a humiliating retreat. German forces can stand firm, just as his ideology demands. There's only one problem. It's completely impossible. The Sixth Army needs roughly 800 tons of supplies per day. Food, ammunition, fuel, medicine. Everything an army of 250,000 men needs to survive and fight.
The Luftwaffe doesn't have nearly enough aircraft to deliver that much material. They also don't have the fuel. Soviet air defenses are shooting down transport planes. Weather is terrible. Improvised airstrips inside the pocket are under constant artillery fire. In reality, Göring's transport planes managed to deliver less than 100 tons per day, sometimes much less. Inside the Stalingrad pocket, German soldiers are starving. A German soldier writes home, "If you're lucky enough to live on one piece of bread divided between 8 men and a taste of warm water, you're doing well." Men are dying of cold, hunger, and disease faster than they are dying in combat. Soldiers shoot horses for meat. Some resort to cannibalism. The situation is unsustainable. Everyone except Hitler can see it. At the end of January 1943, General Paulus, the Sixth Army commander, finally disobeys Hitler's order to fight to the last man. He surrenders. Nearly 100,000 German soldiers march into Soviet captivity. 24 generals are among the prisoners. Only 6,000 of these men will ever return to Germany. The news reaches Hitler at the Wolf's Lair. He's apoplectic with rage. How dare Paulus surrender? Why didn't he commit suicide rather than accept this humiliation? But Hitler's fury can't change the reality. Germany has lost an entire army. It's the single worst military defeat Germany has suffered since Napoleon captured Berlin in 1806. And critically, this disaster is impossible to hide from the German people. The task of managing this catastrophe falls to Joseph Goebbels. And this time, simply lying won't work. Too many German families have sons or husbands or fathers in the Sixth Army. When those men don't come home, people will ask questions. Goebbels realizes he needs a completely new message. Out goes the idea of a quick, easy victory. In comes a new theme: German heroism in the face of overwhelming odds. Noble sacrifice. The idea that true German character emerges not in easy victories, but in desperate struggles. On February 18, 1943, Goebbels delivers what many consider the greatest propaganda speech of his career.
He speaks to 14,000 cheering Nazi Party loyalists in Berlin's Sportpalast. Behind him hangs an enormous banner reading, "Total war equals shortest war." Goebbels tells the crowd that Germany now faces an existential struggle. This is no longer just about conquest or revenge for Versailles. This is about survival. If Germany loses, he warns, German women will be raped, German children enslaved, German cities destroyed, German culture erased from history. But Germans can win through total commitment. Every resource, every person, every ounce of strength must be devoted to the war effort. Near the end of the speech, Goebbels launches into a series of rhetorical questions. Do you want total war? Yes, roars the crowd. Do you want a war more total and radical than anything you can yet imagine? Yes. It's a masterful performance. Goebbels has taken a catastrophic military defeat and reframed it as a call to action. But the propaganda can't hide the reality. Germany is losing. The quick war Hitler promised is gone. What remains is a grinding war of attrition against enemies with greater populations and greater industrial capacity. And it's about to get worse. For 18 months after Pearl Harbor, America has been mobilizing, building ships and planes and tanks, training soldiers, converting its enormous industrial base from civilian to military production. Now, that industrial might is about to hit Germany like a hammer. Here's what American industrial mobilization looked like in practice. Car factories started building tanks and aircraft. Typewriter manufacturers started producing machine guns. Toy companies made shell casings. Every sector of the American economy pivoted to war production. The numbers are staggering. In 1942, American factories produced 47,000 aircraft, 25,000 tanks, and 8 million tons of shipping. By 1943, those numbers nearly doubled. Germany simply can't compete. German factories are running full out, but they're producing a fraction of American output. And German factories are also being bombed, which American factories are not. In May 1943, American troops joined British forces in North Africa. They defeat the Afrika Korps, Germany's legendary desert army. General Rommel, the Desert Fox, is forced to flee. Nearly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers surrender. For Germans, this is shocking. The Afrika Korps was supposed to be invincible. Rommel was portrayed as a military genius. Now his army is destroyed, and North Africa is in Allied hands. A month later, American and British forces invade Sicily. Within weeks, they cross to mainland Italy. And then something happens that Hitler never imagined possible. Italy, Germany's most important European ally, collapses. On July 25, 1943, the Italian Grand Council votes to remove Benito Mussolini from power. Mussolini, who's led Italy since 1922, who's been Hitler's friend and mentor, is arrested. Italy's new government immediately begins negotiating with the Allies for an armistice. Hitler receives the news at the Wolf's Lair. He's devastated. Mussolini isn't just an ally, he's the man who inspired Hitler's own rise to power. The man who showed Hitler that fascism could work. And now he's gone, arrested by his own people, and Italy is about to switch sides. Hitler orders German troops to occupy Italy. They'll hold the country whether Italians want them there or not. But this means spreading German forces even thinner. German soldiers are now fighting in Russia, holding coastal defenses in France and Norway, occupying Italy, and trying to maintain control over an increasingly restive empire. But then, the final blow falls, and it falls directly on Germany itself.
For the first 2 years of the war, Germany's cities remained largely untouched by enemy bombing. Yes, there were raids, but nothing catastrophic.
nothing that seriously disrupted German civilian life. That changes in 1943. American bombers start arriving in Britain by the thousands. Combined with the British Royal Air Force, the Allies now have the capability to launch massive bombing raids on German cities. And they do, day after day, night after night. The city of Hamburg, one of Germany's most important industrial centers, is hit particularly hard. In late July 1943, Allied bombers create a firestorm that kills at least 40,000 people in a single night. Temperatures in the city center reach 1,500 degrees Fahrenheit. The heat is so intense it creates hurricane-force winds that pull people into the flames. Survivors describe scenes from hell. Entire neighborhoods reduced to ash, bodies piled in the streets, children separated from parents in the chaos. Thousands who survive the bombing die from burns, smoke inhalation, or injuries in the days that follow. For Germans, this is a new and terrifying reality. The war they've been watching on newsreels happening safely far away in Russia or North Africa is now happening in their own cities, their own homes. Hitler responds with a significant shift in domestic policy. In August 1943, he appoints Heinrich Himmler as Reich Minister of the Interior. Let me tell you about Heinrich Himmler, because this appointment tells you everything about where Germany is heading. Himmler is the head of the SS, the Schutzstaffel, initially formed as Hitler's personal bodyguard, but now grown into a massive organization controlling concentration camps, the Gestapo, and much of Germany's internal security apparatus. Himmler is a fanatic. He believes in Nazi racial ideology with religious fervor. He oversees the Holocaust. He runs the concentration camp system. He's one of the most dangerous and ruthless men in the Nazi hierarchy. And now he's in charge of domestic policy. This appointment sends a clear message. Hitler can no longer rely on German people supporting him voluntarily. From now on, loyalty will be enforced through fear. Himmler immediately expands the SS's internal surveillance. Listening to foreign radio broadcasts becomes a serious crime. Defeatist talk can get you arrested. Even telling a joke about Hitler can land you in a concentration camp. But despite the repression, despite the propaganda, despite everything Goebbels and Himmler can do, Germans are starting to realize something is very wrong. They haven't seen Hitler in months. He used to appear at major public events, Heroes' Day, party rallies, military celebrations. Now, he's absent. Even when he's supposed to appear, he doesn't show up. Where is the Führer? Germans don't know this, but it's being carefully hidden from them. The man they've placed all their faith in, the man they believe is a strategic genius, the man who's supposed to lead them to victory, he's falling apart. Physically, mentally, emotionally, Hitler is deteriorating. He's not yet 54 years old, but he moves like an old man. He's stooped. He shuffles when he walks. His hands tremble constantly, early signs of what we now think was Parkinson's disease. He spends his evenings at the Wolf's Lair having dinner with his secretaries because he can't face his generals. He goes for long walks with his German Shepherd Blondie because the dog doesn't bring him bad news. He calls his girlfriend Eva Braun every day, something he never did earlier in the war, seeking emotional comfort from her conversations. And critically, he's become almost entirely dependent on his personal physician, Dr. Theodor Morell. Morell is administering an absolutely staggering array of drugs. We have the records. We know what Hitler was taking. Let me read you the partial list. Testaviride, a testosterone supplement. Tempor, a barbiturate suppository. Cymol, an antispasmodic. Quadronox, a sedative. Eucadol, which is oxycodone, a powerful opioid painkiller. Uptalidon, an analgesic. Dolantin, which is pethidine, another opioid painkiller. Upavarilin, for digestive issues. Glyconorm, for cardiac problems. Homosarin, for sedative. Bromnervacid, for anxiety. And this isn't even the complete list. Morell is pumping Hitler full of stimulants in the morning to wake him up, sedatives at night to help him sleep, painkillers for his constant headaches, antispasmodics for his digestive problems, and various other medications for dozens of real or imagined ailments. Hitler is, by any reasonable definition, a drug addict. And he's making decisions about a war involving millions of lives while heavily medicated on a cocktail of opioids, barbiturates, and amphetamines.
But the German people see none of this. When Hitler does appear in propaganda footage, which becomes increasingly rare, it's carefully edited. The cameras don't show his trembling hands. They don't show him struggling to walk. They don't show the dramatic physical decline that's obvious to everyone who sees him in person. Meanwhile, the war situation continues to deteriorate. By late 1943, Soviet forces have recaptured most of the territory Germany conquered in 1941 and 1942. The Wehrmacht is in full retreat on the Eastern Front. In Italy, Allied forces are slowly grinding their way north. German troops are fighting desperately to hold them back, but everyone knows Italy is lost. And the Western Allies are clearly preparing for a major invasion across the English Channel. When that comes, Germany will be fighting on 3 fronts simultaneously. The strategic situation is hopeless. Germany cannot win this war. Every competent military analyst knows it, but Hitler won't accept it. He keeps issuing orders for offensives that don't have enough troops or equipment. He keeps forbidding retreats even when they're militarily necessary. He keeps believing that willpower and determination can overcome material disadvantage. And because he's the Führer, because he's created a system where no one dares contradict him, his delusional orders are followed. More German soldiers die pointlessly. More cities are destroyed. More resources are wasted on futile operations. The gap between propaganda and reality, between what Germans are told and what's actually happening, has become a chasm. Goebbels' propaganda machine is working overtime trying to maintain morale. Newsreels still show German victories. They just have to dig deeper to find them. Speeches still talk about wonder weapons that will turn the tide. Radio broadcasts still refer to Hitler as the greatest military mind of the age. But reality is breaking through. Germans living in cities experience bombing raids almost nightly. Families receive telegrams informing them their sons or husbands have been killed in Russia. Wounded soldiers returning from the front tell stories that contradict the official propaganda. Some Germans start listening to foreign radio broadcasts, a dangerous but increasingly common practice. They hear BBC reports about German defeats. They hear about how Allied forces are advancing. They start to understand that what they've been told is a lie. In universities and churches, small resistance groups form. The White Rose Group in Munich distributes leaflets calling Hitler a mass murderer. They're quickly caught and executed. But the fact that they existed at all shows how much the regime's grip is weakening. The Nazi leadership responds with increased repression. The Gestapo makes thousands of arrests. People disappear into concentration camps for defeatist talk. Public executions become more common. But repression can't change the fundamental reality. Germany is losing the war that Hitler's declaration on America helped create. Let's step back and look at what's happened. In December 1941, Adolf Hitler declared war on the United States. It was a decision made quickly, with minimal consultation,
based on racial ideology and wishful thinking rather than strategic analysis. That decision, combined with the disastrous Stalingrad campaign and Hitler's refusal to allow tactical retreats, transformed what was sold to the German people as a quick war of conquest into a prolonged catastrophe. The war Germany launched in September 1939 with the invasion of Poland was supposed to be different from World War I. This time, the German people were told there would be quick victories and limited suffering. Hitler would use his strategic brilliance to outmaneuver his enemies and deliver triumph after triumph. For a while, it looked like he might actually pull it off. But then reality intervened. The reality was that the Soviet Union was vast, populous, and much tougher than Hitler imagined. The reality was that America's industrial capacity dwarfed Germany's. The reality was that Hitler's racial ideology blinded him to his enemy's actual capabilities. And perhaps most importantly, the reality was that Hitler himself was not the strategic genius the propaganda machine portrayed him as. He was an ideologue who made decisions based on wishful thinking and racial theories rather than careful strategic analysis. He was a man who couldn't admit mistakes or change course when circumstances changed. He was a leader who surrounded himself with yes-men and punished anyone who brought bad news. And by 1943, he was also a drug-dependent recluse, hiding in bunkers, unable to face his generals or his people. His judgment clouded by opioids and barbiturates, his physical health deteriorating rapidly.
The German people didn't know most of this. Goebbels' propaganda machine worked tirelessly to maintain the illusion of Hitler as a great leader. But propaganda can only do so much when cities are being bombed, sons are dying by the hundreds of thousands, and defeat is becoming increasingly obvious. The declaration of war on America didn't just bring a powerful new enemy into the conflict. It revealed the fundamental weakness of Hitler's leadership. It showed that he would make catastrophic decisions based on ideology rather than reality. It exposed the truth that the Nazi leadership, far from being a united team of brilliant strategists, was a collection of drug addicts, art thieves, and fanatics making decisions that would lead to Germany's destruction. By early 1944, when Allied forces landed in Normandy and opened the Western Front, Germany's fate was sealed. Hitler's biggest blunder had stretched German forces beyond any hope of recovery. The Quick War had become a war of attrition that Germany could not possibly win. The man the German people believed was the greatest military genius of the age had actually committed one of the worst strategic blunders in military history, and millions would die because of it.